Hi, everyone. My name is Katie Marshall, and I'm so excited about sharing my interview of an instructional designer with you. Now, my discussion was very present, very technical, and very computer and future focused. But before we get into it, I want to bring us back to an ancient quote that you may have heard before. Tell me and I forget, show me and I remember, involve me and I understand. I bring this up because of how far out into the future we're going to go, but also because this is a cornerstone of the instructional designer's process that we're going to learn about today and that I had the joy and delight of interviewing and learning about. This idea of involvement of the adult learner is going to permeate everything else that we talk about. For my questions before I got into the interview, I developed my questions around the idea of finding out what is actually happening in instructional design in the real world, especially for someone who is a professional instructional designer. I'm a consultant and a coach, and I lead trainings and workshops, but for me, instructional design is pretty much just writing things out on a piece of paper. I wanted to know what it would feel like and look like to really be an instructional designer, especially the frustrations and complications and things that didn't go well, and then what their actual process looks like. What I learned about from my instructional designer was their true instructional design experience. What I wasn't prepared to learn about was what I referenced before, the current state of instructional design, what's really happening, and then also where it might go from here in the future. My interview subject is Benton Wise. He has his bachelor's and master's from Duke, but we won't hold that against him. Go Pack. His experience in education is in education, as well as teaching, and especially in social studies. So he began his career as a teacher. He taught sixth grade, he taught high school, and now he's about 3 years into instructional design. And he got this job purely because he wanted a shift in financial flux and income. He told me that if the teaching pay had stayed the same, he would have remained a teacher because he loved it so much, but he needed a change. So keep something in mind. When I share with you Benton's perspective, we're getting this from someone who started their career as an educator, who worked a lot with kids, and who's just about 3 years into being an instructional designer. So he's going to have a different perspective than someone who has been a pure instructional designer for 5, 10, 15 years. What he does is takes what he learned as a teacher and applies it directly as an instructional designer so that other people may teach adult learners. And he told me that when he began the job, he was so excited to see how similarly creating instructional design felt to lesson planning with kids. And he also told me that he often pulls from realizing that his teaching experience was keeping people engaged. He knew that kids didn't want a lot of instruction or a lot of details. They wanted to be able to get into it and play around with it and learn through experience. And that's what he brings into his instructional design. The big question for me was, do you use these instructional design theories? What does your practice actually look like? Now, learning about Benton's experience as a teacher and his background in education, as well as his new view to instructional design, it might not be surprising that his first and immediate answer was, I don't use ADDIE. What's more interesting to me is that his company specifically wanted someone who didn't use ADDIE, because they'd run into some complications with people who were instructional designers in the past who were overly committed to the system and as such were a bit inflexible and took a little bit longer than they wanted. So if we were to give Benton's process a theoretical shape, it would look more like the successful approximation model, wherein he's utilizing evaluation, design, and development throughout. And then in those processes, he's seeking feedback from the client and he's thinking about the learner. So it's very much a jump in, get going, get creative, and collaborate. Furthermore, this changes often. In fact, he said, my instructional design depends on the project. Every project for him is different. He's worked on health projects, he's worked on drug prevention projects, he's worked on technologically focused engineering projects, and so each time the client changes, and as such, so does his process. However, the constants in his process are involving the client, serving the learners, and this theory of find the gaps, fill the gaps. What he meant by that was analysis. He starts with the question of why aren't people doing it right? So in the exploratory phase where he's working with the client and learning about what the needs are, he's asking, what are people currently doing wrong and what do we need them to change? And then from there, he investigates the content's adjustability to best connect the learner to the material. Adjustability was a term I learned from him, and it's the idea of essentially like taking your clothes to the tailor. What needs to be brought in, what needs to be let out, what can be cropped. So he looks for things like, what's the reading level? Is it at a conversational level, and is it too long? He looks for places for interactions and breaks, and he looks for places where information needs to be reinforced or where time to unpack the content needs to be added. He also wants to look at the interface. Is it intuitive? And if it's a game, are they actually going to play it? So that's that fun ability. How do we make this social? How do we get people involved? And how do we make sure they're actually learning and having fun? From there, he shared a really great metaphor for me. He said, being an instructional designer is like being a chef. And Addie is like baking. So it's like following a very strict recipe. Whereas you saw instructional design more like cooking, which is where you adapt based on who's eating. You know, are there allergies? Are there food preferences? What time of day is it? What's the meal? Cooking is more adaptable and specified, where you saw baking is more specific. And that is how I will remember Addie versus personal ID from here. One of the key takeaways that I had from our conversation on his process was the value of managing relationships. First are the client partnerships. He said, again, each project is different because each client is different and they have different needs, they have different budgets, they have different timelines. So you have to find all of these and then gear your work towards that. He said, sometimes clients have it written all out for you and others have no idea and need you to direct. And this is where adapting through communication comes in as a skill. Further, he said that there's team relationships, because often he'll work with an entire team of people. He'll have some designers, other instructional designers. He might have some artists or some online artists, or he might have some game specialists. When it comes to subject matter experts, while everyone's working towards the same goal, there are conflicts that arise. And he said, especially in the world of instructional designers, everyone's got a different style. So you have to manage those conflicts. Further, when it comes to delivering a final project, you have to use the different communication styles. And you're all rooting for the client success and the learner success, but you have to make sure that everyone on the team is heard as well. When we get into the real world instructional design, this is an interesting thought of Benton's. He said, traditional instructional design is like someone handing you a car manual. They expect people to read the whole manual when they buy the car. And a lot of jobs are like that. They'll give you a job and a textbook. What we're finding is no one is reading the manual anymore. Benton's process looks more like this, wherein he uses the term hijack the learning process. Here's what I got from that. He explained that most learning is social, and what people are doing is they're going into a job and they're getting the technical manual of how to do things, but they're asking their colleagues how to do it instead, and then they do it that way. What that means is that there's a set way to do something, and then there's a way everyone else is doing it. And so to merge the two together to meet what the client actually wants their people to do requires imagination. And the goal of the ID then is to gain attention, prove to learners that they should listen, and then do something fun so that people can actually apply it and learn it, and that they'll actually carry it on into their lives. One line I really liked was the idea of make learning not feel like learning. Again, we're in our current state, we're in 2020, but let's bring it back to the ancient Chinese philosopher Zunzi, involve me and I remember. Involvement doesn't always feel like just telling someone to do something. And ask them, how does this work for you? How would you use this? What do you like about this? What do you not like about it? So the idea is to break into someone's learning process and shift it. So they pick up on a new skill that they might enjoy more and might make their job a little bit easier, if not ideally more fun. Benton and I spoke in the middle of March. And this was right when COVID-19 was really starting to impact a lot of Americans' everyday working life and personal life too. What he mentioned is that most traditional ID processes are not designed for our modern workplace. With all of our technological advancements, remote workers, global companies, traditional methods that might take an instructional designer 2 to 4 months might result in a training being obsolete, because by the time a training is complete, the problem might have fixed itself, or the issue could have changed or evolved. And so the timing of things has really shifted the way we operate. We looked at the COVID-19 pandemic through an instructional design lens. One of the things I gained through this interview and that really impacted me was that anything can be instructional design. Anything that we're learning, anything that we're picking up on, any skill development or change is instructional design. So when we think about COVID-19, back in the middle of March, we were still thinking about people just being told to stay home. And Benton's perspective was, that's bad instructional design, because there was no why, there was no thing to do. Instead, it wasn't fun and it wasn't social. So it was hard to get people excited about it. And so he said, if we want to do this as a learning design experiment, you have to ask, okay, what's the objective? And if it's to keep people inside, then we need to think about how to inform people of services they can use to help them stay inside. We need to model positive behavior, such as FaceTime and remote work. And then when people do those behaviors, we have to uplift them and highlight them as heroes so that people know they have something positive to model. He said, people here stay in their houses and they feel imprisoned. You have to give them a game plan. Stay in and clean on Wednesday, take a picture, share it to Instagram, and they'll do it. That is fun, social, and pulls on our need to help and our want to be involved. This is where we get into the really exciting stuff that I had no way thought that we would cover in our discussion. And that's the future of instructional design. Ben said it's going to get techie. There's going to be a lot more technological tools. There's going to be different ideas of virtual reality, interactive online learning, and e-learning. He also said that a lot of instructional designers will start to need to be developers and instructional designers. A lot of companies want their instructional designer to be able to do it all. When I asked him about his job responsibilities, he defined it as a jack of all trades. Sometimes he writes blog posts, he does client relationship work, he does design, he does project management. It's the whole gamut. And he's an official instructional designer. He said that as we move forward, instructional designers will begin to embrace new technologies because their clients will, and so will their clients' employees. And then comes this really exciting idea of micro-learning through social media. This rocks my world. He said, consider Instagram and TikTok as learning management systems. Every content creator on those sites is an instructional designer. They're amateurs who don't know the official tools, and they don't have to. This rocks my world. So what he was saying is that people who are using online apps through social media, TikTok and Instagram, through their videos and through their story sharing, are teaching each other how to do things. So when we think about instructional design, it's changing. The example he gave was on TikTok. Imagine someone sees a dance on TikTok. It's silly and goofy, but they want to do it. They then make a video of themselves doing the dance, and then someone tells them, hey, you did that incorrectly. So then someone else makes a dance video that explains all of the steps. Through that, they're instructional designing. It doesn't feel like it because TikTok and Instagram are these social media apps that our friends use, our friends' kids use, but we do formative instructional design. It feels like we can't put them together, but that's Ben's prediction on where instructional design is going, is this micro-learning place. Two other thoughts about where instructional design might go is the idea of augmented reality. So think about Pokemon Go. You hold your phone up with the app, you place it in front of something, and then you see something appear, and then that's how you get the Pokemon. He's currently working on a project about augmented reality and he's trying to figure out how to get the entire company to do it. So he's asking himself, how would I be inspired to download that kind of app, and then how would I use it? So he's creating the training around augmented reality. The idea is that you would be able to hold up your phone to a barcode, and then that barcode would tell you a story about a tool or a process, and then you would learn it through your phone and maybe through a game. Another place we're going is e-learning, and a lot of us have already done things like this. E-learning is valuable because it enables people to better their work. It's accessible and it's immediately applicable. Plus, you can share the certificates on your resume and your LinkedIn, and it makes you look very good at what you do. The idea is that all of these things that we see as fun and exciting in our personal lives can now start to be used as instructional design tools as well. In conclusion, each instructional design project is unique. That was my theory before I came into this discussion, and then it was really affirmed by what I learned from Benton. The keys to success are communication, adaptability, and agility through your design process. If each instructional design project is unique, then you have to change each time you do something to best suit the client needs and the learners. Furthermore, especially when it comes to instructional design for adult learners, we have to inform people of why they're doing this training. Why is this valuable? What is the impact of learning it? And what can you use after you learn this training? Also, the note that successful learning is socially based. We need to know that we can use what we learned in social situations and that we can share it with others. And I also learned that there's a lot of exciting new instructional design that could involve dance videos. It might not involve dance videos, but it will involve different kinds of video component and also people picking up on things. This idea of micro-learning is exciting because it's accessible. It allows people to use learning in ways that they maybe haven't been able to before, and it inspires more creativity in instructional design. I, for one, after this conversation, got really excited about where the future of instructional design is going. And especially in times of conflict and fear and anxiety, like right now with COVID-19, it is encouraging to think that instructional design could be used to help people in an accessible and immediate way, as well as professionally and educationally. Thank you for this opportunity. I so enjoyed this project, and I wish you all the best.